The first thing I noticed was that Valerie Morgan had buttoned her beige trench coat wrong. The top button sat one place too high, pulling the collar toward her throat, while a stack of seating charts bent against her wrist. She stood across the hall from my apartment at 11:30 on Tuesday night, listening to the building's old radiator tick behind her. She had never knocked on my door before. I set the brass master key card to the grand in my palm and stepped back. "You can come in if you want. The door's open." Valerie looked past me into the quiet apartment, then down at the pages in her hands. The ink had run where her thumb had pressed too hard. I didn't know where else to go. "Then start with water." I moved to the kitchen, filled a glass, and set it on the coaster beside the armchair. I stayed on the opposite sofa. Valerie took the chair, but kept her coat closed, as if she might need to leave before the room could ask anything of her. For 8 months, we had been neighbors who exchanged mail, held elevators, and recognized each other's footsteps in the corridor. I knew she ran a boutique events agency. I knew she carried long days in a leather portfolio and never complained about them in public. I had noticed the details because hospitality had trained me to read a room before a guest stated the problem. Tonight, the problem had followed her home. "My venue filed for bankruptcy this afternoon," she said. "The doors are locked. My deposit is inside. The event is Friday night, and my client is bringing 50 board members. If I don't have a replacement location by Wednesday morning, I lose the contract. If I lose the contract, I can't keep my 2 assistants." She touched the top seating chart. "Sterling's company paid for a corporate retreat, not a cancellation story. He already thinks a boutique agency is a risk." "What did he send you?" She pulled an email from her phone and turned the screen toward me. Sterling wanted a 30% reduction in her agency fee because the venue change had damaged confidence in her logistics. The phrase was polished enough to sound reasonable and sharp enough to cut. "He wants you to sign a new amendment tonight?" "He wants it by 8 in the morning." She took a sip of water. "My original contract protects the fee. His amendment turns a venue failure into my responsibility." I kept my eyes on the screen. "I can check whether the Grand has a room available. I can't promise a space before I review the hold, the permit status, and the hotel's own approval process. Do you want me to make that inquiry?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. "Yes, please." That was the first decision she made in my apartment, and I treated it as one. I did not tell her the problem was solved. I opened my laptop, sent a short message to Priya Shah, our sales director, and asked her to review Friday inventory before the morning meeting. I copied Marin Lee from Hotel Counsel and requested a written answer on any fee concession, venue release, and liability language. Valerie watched the names appear on the screen. "You have a whole team for one room?" "We have a team for promises that can affect a client's business." The corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. "That sounds less romantic than the movies." "It is also less likely to become evidence." Her laugh came quietly, but it loosened something in the room. She finished the water and stood. This time I did not tell her to sit. I walked to the door and held it open. "I'll call you as soon as I have a documented option," I said. "Not a favor, an option." She looked at the brass key card in my hand. "You always talk like a hotel policy." "Only after 11. She returned across the hall before midnight. I watched her door close, then looked at the key card. It was heavy enough to remind me that every access point had a record, a limit, and someone responsible for opening it. At 7:40 Wednesday morning, Valerie met me at the Sunny Patio Cafe attached to the hotel. The glass walls were bright with early light, and the espresso machine hissed behind the counter. She placed her portfolio on the table and aligned it with the edge as if a straight line could keep the morning from moving too quickly. Priya's email was open on my tablet. The Magnolia Room had been held for carpet replacement, but facilities had found moisture beneath the service corridor overnight. The room could not be released until the maintenance panel was inspected and the fire safety record was updated. Priya had attached a preliminary venue release form, not a guarantee. Valerie read the first page. "So the room is not available?" "Not yet. The terrace is a possible alternative, but it requires a capacity review, a weather plan, a load check for equipment, and written approval from sales and counsel. She looked at me over the tablet. You could have told me last night that the hotel was going to save me. The hotel isn't going to save you. We may be able to give you a compliant place to do the work you already sold. The distinction landed. Her shoulders remained tense, but she stopped gripping the portfolio. Sterling's amendment is worse than I told you, she said. He wants the fee cut, a broad indemnity, and a clause saying I'm responsible for every delay caused by the replacement venue. If I refuse, he can terminate for convenience. I read the pages once, then handed them back. Maren should review the language. I can help you compare it to your original contract, but I'm not your lawyer. You read contracts for a living. I read hotel contracts for operational risk. That's not the same as giving legal advice. She leaned back. For the first time that morning, she looked less like someone waiting for rescue and more like a professional deciding which help was useful. All right, she said, let's compare them. We worked through the original agreement line by line. Her fee was tied to planning, staffing, vendor coordination, and event delivery. The venue was named as a third-party service, not as an unconditional guarantee. Sterling's amendment tried to erase that distinction. Valerie marked the lines that belonged to her agency. I marked the operational terms the hotel could actually support. Maren answered questions in a written message, then joined the call at 8:30. She was direct. The hotel could offer the terrace only through a separate venue addendum. Sterling's fee dispute belonged between Sterling and Valerie. The hotel could confirm facilities, access windows, approved layouts, and safety restrictions. But it could not promise that a client's amendment was enforceable. Valerie listened without interrupting. When Maren finished, she asked, "If I accept the terrace, can the written addendum state that the hotel owns the venue change and my agency keeps its original fee?" It can state the allocation of responsibilities," Maren said. "Sterling must consent to the revised venue, deposit schedule, access times, and layout approval. Your agency remains responsible for event coordination. The hotel remains responsible for the space it controls. Any dispute outside that scope goes through the contract process." Valerie picked up her pen. "Then that is the structure I want." I waited until she looked at me. "Do you want me to ask Priya for the terrace package, or do you want to make the request yourself?" She considered it. "Ask with me there. I want to hear the answer from the person who can release it." I sent Priya a message. 10 minutes later, she arrived with a folder, a printed floor plan, and the calm expression of someone who had already found 3 ways a plan could fail. "The terrace is not a free upgrade," Priya said. "It is a different venue. We can reserve it conditionally until noon Thursday. After that, the written safety inspection and weather plan must be complete." Valerie opened her portfolio. "What do you need from me?" "A proposed guest count, equipment list, service schedule, and a signed acknowledgement that your agency will not add structures or elevated platforms without approval." "I can provide those by 10. Priya nodded. "Then I can issue the conditional venue release by 11, subject to council and facilities." I watched Valerie write the deadlines in her own hand. It was not a miracle. It was a path with several doors, each one requiring the right document. Sterling called before 10. Valerie put him on speaker. "I need certainty," he said. "The venue disappeared because your agency failed to secure it." Valerie's gaze moved to the pages in front of her. "The venue filed for bankruptcy after the contract was signed. I have a replacement option under hotel review. Your original fee remains under the existing agreement unless both parties sign a revised addendum." "Your replacement option is not my problem." "The venue change is your approval point," she replied. "The fee is a separate term. I will send you a documented proposal at 11. There was a pause. "You're making this difficult." "I'm separating the issues so they can be resolved." She ended the call before he could turn the silence into pressure. Her hand remained on the phone, but it no longer shook. "That was good," I said. "It felt like stepping off a roof." The railing was the contract. She looked at me. "You really do turn everything into a building." Hotels are buildings with invoices. This time her laugh was clear. By 10:15, Valerie had produced the guest count, the equipment list, and a revised service schedule. I checked the terrace dimensions against the floor plan while she calculated table spacing. Our work was collaborative in the most practical way. She protected the event's experience, and I protected the space's limits. The terrace could hold the existing guest count, but not the raised VIP platform Sterling had requested in an earlier email. I entered the restriction into the draft addendum instead of leaving it as a verbal warning. Valerie read the sentence and changed reasonable modifications to modifications approved in writing by the event planner and hotel facilities manager. "That is stronger," I said. "It is clearer." "You are allowed to say both." Priya returned at 11 with the conditional venue release. Marin had approved the responsibility language. Facilities had scheduled the inspection for Thursday morning. The release stated that the terrace was reserved for Valerie's event only if the inspection, weather plan, and client addendum were completed. Valerie signed the planner acknowledgement. She did not sign away her agency's rights. She signed the document that described what she controlled. At noon, we sent Sterling the proposed counter-amendment. It preserved Valerie's original fee, required a non-refundable deposit for the terrace, set a written change order process, and made the event location subject to his documented consent. The hotel's responsibility was limited to the terrace, approved access, and facilities review. Valerie's agency remained responsible for staffing, vendors, design, and execution. Sterling answered in 12 minutes. He rejected the fee, questioned the terrace capacity, and demanded an immediate walkthrough. "He wants to use uncertainty as leverage," Valerie said. "Then give him a scheduled answer instead of an argument." She looked at the calendar. "Thursday at 2, after the inspection." "That is your call." "Yes," she said, "it is." The rest of Wednesday became a series of small, visible victories. Priya secured the terrace hold. Marin revised one sentence in the addendum so that the venue change would not alter Valerie's fee. Facilities sent a checklist for weather protection, emergency egress, and equipment placement. Valerie built the event schedule around those limits, moving the tasting window and reassigning 2 staff members without dismissing either one. At 6, she brought a paper bag to the cafe table. Inside was a sandwich and an apple. "You forgot lunch," she said. "I had coffee." "Coffee is not a food group at the Grand." She pushed the bag toward me. I opened it and found the apple cut into 4 neat pieces. "Why is the apple divided?" "Because you look like someone who forgets to eat until the problem is solved." "That is an unfairly accurate assessment." "I plan events. Accuracy is the job." The care went both directions for the first time. It was a small thing, but small things become structure when they are repeated. Thursday morning arrived with low clouds and a clean wind off the street. The facilities manager, Omar, met us on the terrace with a digital capacity report, a fire safety checklist, and a maintenance technician. Valerie carried the event plan. I carried the conditional venue release. The inspection was not dramatic. That was what made it valuable. Omar measured the clear exits, checked the fixed railing, confirmed the service corridor, and compared the planned equipment to the approved load. The maintenance technician tested the exterior outlets. Priya photographed the completed walkthrough for the venue file. At one table, Valerie noticed that Sterling's requested ice sculpture would sit too close to the emergency path. She moved it on the plan before anyone had to tell her. "If we place it here, the visual line improves and the exit remains clear," she said. Omar marked the change in his report. Approved, provided the base stays within the listed weight. Valerie wrote the limit beside the drawing. The inspector's signature went beneath it. The terrace was approved for the planned event, not for every idea a guest might request. Priya issued the final venue confirmation to Valerie and Sterling. The message listed the inspection date, permitted layout, weather contingency, access window, and the requirement for written client consent. Sterling arrived at 2 with 2 board members and the impatience of a man who believed an early arrival could become authority. Valerie met him in the lobby with the stamped venue report and the counter amendment. "The terrace is conditionally approved under this layout," she said. "The report and access terms are attached. Any change requires written review." Sterling looked at me. "Can't you just make an exception?" "I can explain the process," I said. "Valerie is the event planner. She decides whether the requested change fits the event. Do you want me to answer the facilities questions, Valerie, or would you like to lead?" She did not hesitate. "I'll lead." Sterling's jaw tightened. He asked about the platform, the additional tables, and the lighting rig. Valerie answered each question with the report in front of her. When he requested elevated VIP seating, she pointed to the load restriction and declined it. "The terrace is approved for the current design," she said. "I will not ask the hotel to approve a change that conflicts with the inspection record. We can use the existing arrangement, or we can move the VIP tables to the ballroom." One board member looked at Sterling. "The current layout is fine." Sterling reached for the pen. He signed the addendum. The signature did not erase the week's fear. It simply converted uncertainty into obligations that everyone could read. For the next hour, Valerie and her staff staged the terrace. I went to the lobby to answer guest questions while she directed the design team. At 3:30, the concierge called to say Sterling had returned with Eleanor Vale, one of the hotel's senior investors. Eleanor was elegant, impatient, and accustomed to treating the lobby as a private hallway. She found Valerie near the service entrance, reviewing the equipment list. "Why is this vendor refusing a guest request?" Eleanor asked. Valerie closed the folder. "Because the request exceeds the approved terrace load." Eleanor turned to me. "Nolan, surely the hotel can accommodate one executive platform." "The facilities report says the platform is not approved," I replied. "We can request a revised inspection, but we cannot install it before tonight's event." Sterling folded his arms. This is what happens when you give a small planner too much control. Valerie's expression tightened, but she remained facing him. "The control is written into the addendum. You signed it." Eleanor looked from the report to the terrace. "Is there a safer alternative?" Valerie pointed to the ballroom floor plan. "The ballroom can take the platforms. The terrace cannot. If the board needs elevated seating, I can move that portion inside. The event will still begin on the terrace." Eleanor considered the two plans. "Do it that way." Sterling started to object. Valerie raised one hand. "The decision is made. I'll send the revised guest flow to your team in 5 minutes." She turned to her staff and began assigning the move. No one looked at her as if she were asking permission anymore. When we were alone in the service corridor, she let out a careful breath. "You did not speak for me," she said. "You told me you wanted to lead. And you listened. That is a useful hotel skill." She touched the folder against her chest. "I thought you would take over." "I almost did." She studied me. "What stopped you?" "You asked for help. You did not ask me to become you." Her eyes softened, but the moment ended when a catering assistant hurried through the double doors carrying a tray of red wine glasses. His shoe caught the threshold. The tray tipped, and a dark splash crossed the front of Valerie's beige coat and the blouse beneath it. The assistant froze. "I'm sorry." Valerie looked down at the stain. The event began in 90 minutes. "It's a coat," she said, though the words came out thin. "Clean the floor first." She turned toward the staff hallway. "I can't walk into a corporate reception like this." "Do you want to go home?" I asked. She stopped. "No," she said. "I want a replacement. I want to stay. Then I can ask Sarah at the boutique to hold options. You choose the dress. I'll coordinate the timing." "All right." We crossed the lobby together. The luxury boutique sat beside the hotel's east entrance, bright with racks of evening clothes and mirrors framed in brass. Sarah met us at the door, took one look at the clock, and understood the problem without turning it into a spectacle. "I have 3 professional options in your size," she told Valerie. "You can try them in the back. Nolan can wait near the register." Valerie selected a dark emerald sheath dress with a modest neckline and a clean line through the waist. She carried it behind the curtain while Sarah brought a second size. I stood outside the fitting area, answering messages from the catering manager and confirming that the ballroom platform would remain within the approved load. After a few minutes, Valerie's voice came from behind the curtain. "Can you come in? I need your help back here." The old version of that sentence might have made me misunderstand the moment. The practical reason was already clear. She had chosen a dress with a zipper that had caught in the lining. "May I step into the fitting area?" I asked. "Yes, please keep your eyes on the zipper and not on the clock." "The clock is the more threatening object." She moved aside so I could stand behind her without crowding her. The fitting booth smelled of steamed fabric and clean store air. I kept my hands on the zipper pull and the lining, never touching her skin. The fabric had folded into the metal teeth. "I'm going to ease the lining down," I said. "Tell me if anything pulls." "It's fine." I worked the cloth free 1 millimeter at a time. The zipper released with a small mechanical click. I pulled it up to the point she could reach and stepped back immediately. "That's enough," she said. "I can finish it." She did. Then she checked the dress in the mirror, turned toward me, and adjusted one sleeve. "It is professional," she said. "It is also attached to you, which improves the situation." She laughed under her breath. "Thank you. You chose it. You asked me to. That is different." She met my eyes in the mirror. "For the terrace too? You designed the event. Priya released the space. Omar approved the layout. Marin reviewed the wording. Sterling signed the addendum. I helped you keep the steps in order." Her reflection changed first. The tightness around her mouth eased, and she stopped adjusting the sleeve. "You don't lower the standard," she said. "You elevate the guest," I finished. "That sounds like a rule you were taught." "It was. My first manager said hospitality is not giving people everything they demand. It is giving them a better experience without compromising what keeps the room safe." Valerie looked toward the curtain, then back at me. I spent years thinking a standard was just another word for something I could not afford. Today it kept your fee intact. Today it kept me in the room. She stepped out from behind the curtain, carrying the stained coat over one arm. "Let's go run the event." The terrace filled gradually. The weather held. The lighting was set according to the approved plan. The tables followed the stamped layout, and the ballroom held the small group that needed elevated seating. The event did not look compromised. It looked intentional. Before the first guests arrived, Valerie gathered her staff beside the service entrance. She did not give them a speech about surviving a crisis. She gave them a sequence. The first team would guide the board members to the terrace. The second would direct the approved VIP group toward the ballroom. No one would move a platform, power cable, or sculpture without calling her. She handed the signed layout to her operations assistant and kept the inspection copy in her own folder. "If the weather changes, we follow the contingency plan," she said. "If Sterling asks for a change, we put it in writing. If anyone feels pressured, they come to me before promising anything." One of the assistants raised a hand. "What if he says the board is waiting?" "Then the board can wait for a safe answer." Her voice was calm. The answer was not borrowed from me. It belonged to her now. I checked the radio channel and saw her notice. "You assigned yourself the most difficult position." "I assigned myself the position where the information arrives first." "That is also the most difficult position." "I know." She said it without fear, which was different from saying it without fear of failure. She had learned where the pressure entered the room and placed herself beside the door. Valerie moved through the reception with a clipboard in one hand and a radio in the other. She corrected a late delivery, found a missing place card, and rerouted a board member around the ballroom platform without once looking toward me for permission. I stayed near the service entrance, available but not hovering. One of Sterling's board members stopped beside her. "The transition between spaces was smooth," he said. "Who designed the flow?" "I did," Valerie answered. "It shows." She glanced across the terrace at me. I raised my glass of water, not a toast, just an acknowledgement. At 10, the event began to wind down. Sterling approached Valerie near the bar. His expression had changed from irritation to calculation. "You delivered," he said. "The board is satisfied. I'm prepared to keep your agency for the quarterly retreats." Valerie placed her clipboard on the bar. "The final invoice follows the addendum you signed. Payment is due under the original schedule." "Of course," he smiled as if he'd offered a gift. "And the retainer?" She looked at him for a long moment. Around them, 2 board members and one of Valerie's assistants were close enough to hear. "No," she said. Sterling's smile disappeared. "You should think carefully. This is a $70,000 relationship. I have thought carefully. My agency will not renew with a client who tries to reduce a contracted fee through pressure, requests changes outside a safety approval, and treats a venue failure as a reason to question my competence. The event is complete. The relationship is not continuing." He looked toward me, expecting the hotel to intervene. I did not move. Valerie picked up her clipboard. "Thank you for signing the addendum, Mr. Sterling. My accounts team will send the final invoice tonight." Sterling left without an argument because she had removed the room in which he could negotiate. Her assistant hugged her near the service door. Valerie held on for a second longer than usual, then returned to the floor and helped close the event. Later, the terrace was empty. The catering team had finished the last checklist, and the city lights had replaced the afternoon glare. Valerie stood at the railing in the emerald dress, her stained coat folded beside her. "You fired your largest client," I said. "I declined a future contract. That is the precise version. It is also the version I can put in writing." The wind moved across the terrace. She folded her arms. "I was afraid," she said. "Not of Sterling, of the silence after I said no. I thought the room would disappear. It didn't. No, it became mine." I removed my jacket and held it out. "Would you like this?" She looked at it, then at me. "Yes, please." I placed it around her shoulders without pulling her closer. She settled the collar herself. "Thank you for asking," she said. "I'm learning." She looked over the railing. "My team is having dinner tomorrow, a small place downtown. I want you there." "As the hotelier who handled the venue?" "As Nolan." The answer reached me more deeply than any dramatic declaration could have. She was not thanking a professional service. She was making a place for me in a room that belonged to her. "I'll come," I said. Friday night ended with a written event file, a signed inspection report, an approved layout, and a client addendum that assigned each responsibility to the right person. The Grand had not performed a miracle. Valerie had not been rescued from her own life. She had asked for help, chosen which help to accept, and then stood behind every decision she made. At dinner the next evening, her assistants raised glasses to the terrace. Sarah sent a dessert from the boutique next door. Priya joined us for the first 10 minutes and told Valerie the venue file was complete. Marin emailed the final legal packet before the check arrived. Valerie opened the packet on her phone, scrolled through the signed release, and locked the screen. It is strange seeing the whole week reduced to 12 pages. "That is what documents do. They make a panic portable." "You make paperwork sound comforting." I have spent years watching people discover that a clear sentence can keep a bad day from becoming a permanent one. She rested her hand over the phone. The first sentence I needed was that the venue bankruptcy was not my failure. The second was that your fee was still protected. And the third? I looked at her. That you were allowed to decide what happened next. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she divided the last piece of bread and placed half on my plate. The gesture was ordinary, almost hidden beneath the conversation, but I felt its meaning. She was not thanking me for a rescue. She was making a habit of sharing the table. Valerie sat beside me, not across from me. Her shoulder touched mine when she reached for the bread, and neither of us treated it like an emergency. "You know," she said, "your key card is still in your pocket." I checked. The brass card caught the light. It survived the event. "So did you." "There were no guarantees." She smiled. "There are receipts?" 6 months later, Valerie's agency occupied a bright loft downtown with tall windows, 2 meeting rooms, and a wall of framed event plans. The first month had been difficult. She had replaced Sterling's revenue with 3 smaller clients whose contracts were clear and whose expectations did not require her to surrender her boundaries. Her assistants stayed. One became operations manager. The other began designing vendor systems of her own. The Grand continued to send work to her agency, but the referral agreement was written, priced, and reviewed like every other professional relationship. No favors hid inside it. On a cold Tuesday evening, I sat at Valerie's desk with a logistics matrix open on my tablet. The brass master key card to the penthouse suite rested on the console near the window. Its familiar weight belonged to my hotel, my access, and the responsibilities I carried there. Valerie checked a lighting contract. Did you send the deposit? At noon, the payment schedule and late load-in clause are attached. She nodded. Boundaried? Documented. Even better. She opened a drawer and took out a small brass key. It was not a key card. It was an ordinary office key with a narrow blue tag. This is for you, she said. I turned it over. What does it open? The front door, the side entrance, the file room. You can use any of them without asking me to come rescue you. That sounds like a significant amount of access. It comes with a written policy. Of course it does. She stood and placed the key in my hand. Her fingers closed around mine for a moment, then released. The brass master key card remained on the console. The small office key rested in my palm. One belonged to a hotel built around controlled access. The other belonged to a life Valerie had built by setting limits, requesting support, and choosing what could enter. My old manager's lesson returned, but it no longer sounded like a rule for guests. You don't lower the standard, you elevate the guest. Valerie had elevated the work without lowering herself. She had let me help without handing me her decisions. I had learned that a boundary was not a locked door between 2 people. It was the frame that let them stand safely on the same side. She looked at the key in my hand. Are you staying for dinner? What is the approval process? There is a form. I'll sign it. She walked toward the small kitchen. I followed, placing the hotel key card beside her office key on the desk before I left the room. The 2 pieces of brass touched once, making a soft sound against the wood. The weight was still there. It just meant something different now. The end. Core lesson. Healthy love does not ask either person to surrender their standards. It makes room for help, clear responsibility, honest choices, and the courage to say no when a relationship depends on self-erasure. Green flag. The green flag was not Nolan solving every problem for Valerie. It was his willingness to explain the process, ask before acting, respect her answer, and stand beside her while she made the final decision herself. Like and subscribe. Would you choose Valerie's decision to protect her business, even if it meant losing her biggest client? Like, subscribe, and tell me your answer in the comments.